David Fincher is one of my favorite movie directors of all time, and I feel like if you catch me on the right day of the week, I might even say he's the best one we've ever had. With the release of The Killer, we now have 12 movies in his filmography, so it's time to rank these bad boys from worst to best. Let's get right into it because you can probably guess what's in last place. Coming in at number 12 is Alien 3, and if you've spent any time around the channel, you probably know that I am a massive fan of the Alien franchise. And don't get me wrong, this movie does a perfectly good job being a shit show all by itself, but oh my god does it look unforgivable when you compare it to the movies that came before it in Alien and Aliens. They gave us one of the best horror movies of all time. They gave us one of the best action movies of all time. And then they gave us this abomination. This movie basically gave me trust issues. And I don't totally blame Fincher for the way this whole thing turned out because this production was clearly a nightmare from the get-go. They started filming without a finished script, they paused production halfway through, they scribbled down some ending that made sense with what they already shot, they finished filming, and then a producer basically told Fincher to kick rocks and just tore this movie apart in the editing room any way he saw fit. And that's how we got this little dumpster fire. This just has to be one of the most disappointing movies in general though, right? Because, the things I would do to have David Fincher attached to an Alien movie now, disgusting and unspeakable things. I'll just leave it at that. Coming in at number 11 is Mank. And I am just so not this movie's intended audience, it's not even funny. I don't really think there are that many people that are though. Like unless you know someone that has a deep knowledge of the movie studio politics of the 1930s and is a raging alcoholic, this movie is probably their Bible, but it is just not my cup of tea. This was a very big change of pace compared to what we've come to expect from Fincher's movies in recent years. There were no thrills, no twists, no messed up scenes seared into my brain forever. Call me a total knuckle dragger, but that's what I want when I sit down to watch one of his movies. I'm a sick puppy. Now, obviously, from a technical standpoint, it's fantastic. All of David Fincher's expertise behind the camera is effortlessly put on display here, and the movie really does feel like you got it out of a time capsule from the time period they're playing around in. I just wish all of that effort and detail was channeled into a story and characters I had an easier time trying to connect with. It all feels so inaccessible to the casual audience, and Herman J. Mankiewicz has to be one of the least relatable characters I've come across in recent years. And I get it, not every movie is intended for every person, and holy shit was this one not for me. Coming in at number 10 is Panic Room, and this is probably the most straightforward and simple movie that David Fincher has ever made. There's not that many characters, it all takes place over the course of a couple days, and for the vast majority of the film, it all occurs in one single location. It's probably the most surface level movie he's ever made too. It's not nearly as intricate, complex, or heavy as some of the movies he's made later on in his career. Like, you're not going to be wondering what happened at the end of Panic Room. And if you are, you've got much bigger problems on your hands. But yeah, this is a fun thriller that has good performances and lets Fincher strut his stuff a little bit. It's never setting out to do anything more than that, and I didn't need anything more out of it. The only thing I needed less of was Jared Leto. I'm kidding. Kinda. Coming in at number 9 is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, and this is one of those movies that I like, but I just wish I was able to get more out of it personally. When you boil it down, this story is about a wrinkly old man baby that gets younger and younger as time goes on, so we get to watch him experience his life backwards. How much of an impact can it really leave? And even though I don't think it has to be as long as it is to get all of its points across, I still think it actually had some profound things to say about love, death, and regret. But overall, I just wasn't able to connect with the story as much as I wanted to. And I mean, come on, it's a story about a guy that ages in reverse. No one's able to really relate to that. But I just wasn't as taken with this journey as I know a lot of other people were, even though the decades-long scope of it all is definitely something to behold. In theory, there's a really interesting main character here that for whatever reason, I don't think they do enough with. Besides, we already have a real-life Benjamin Button. His name's Michael Cera. Guy has been progressively getting younger since 2009. I don't know how he does it. Coming in at number 8 is The Game, and to me, this is just pulp thriller entertainment to its purest extent. It's literally a movie about a rich guy that gets signed up for this real-life game experience as a birthday present. He's gonna go throughout his days not knowing what's part of his real life and what's part of the game, but to the most extreme level possible. The entire world is his escape room, basically. And I just can't deny that there is something addictively entertaining about watching Michael Douglas run around on the brink of having a psychotic breakdown, not knowing what the hell is going on for the better part of 2 hours. He seriously sells the shit out of it, and it's actually one of my favorite performances from him, so much so that maybe he didn't know what was going on, and these are just his honest reactions to the bonkers gauntlet that Fincher is putting this character through. I do think this is a movie that relies so heavily on its twist that you're never going to be able to replicate that first watch experience again, and there's maybe a few decisions that ask you to suspend your disbelief a little bit too much, but that first watch is an absolute adrenaline-filled roller coaster that's going to make you think twice whenever your siblings give you a birthday present. They're always up to something. Coming in at number 7 is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and this might actually be Fincher at his most dark and bleak. And that's saying something when we're talking about the guy that filmed a commercial of a baby smoking a cigarette for the American Cancer Society. It's actually kind of iconic, I'm not gonna lie. But this movie is relentless with its imagery, its themes, and its story. And one of the main things keeping you engaged in the first place, because so much of this movie is a bummer, is our two main characters, played by Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara. You actually care about them and want them to succeed because they're not just out there solving this big mystery, they're simultaneously battling their own demons. I think this movie overstays its welcome a bit by the end, and that's not a knock on its pacing because this is one of those long movies that doesn't feel as long as it is. I think it just covers so much ground in the meat and potatoes of the story that it takes its time to answer all of the questions that popped up along the whole journey. Definitely at the bottom of the list when it comes to rewatchability due to its length and the subject matter, but still another banger of a film from David Fincher. Coming in at number 6 is The Killer, the new kid on the block. And what better way for David Fincher to return to making these stylish and angsty thrillers than to make one where he's literally the main character? Like, we've all heard the rumors over the years that he's one of the more hard Hollywood directors to work with. He'll do a scene 1,000 times until he gets it right. He doesn't care who he pisses off in the process. So I kind of love that he's making fun of himself a bit here. Like, this assassin character is a total perfectionist, and he's always reminding himself that he has to keep his emotions out of how he conducts his line of work. Sound like anyone we know? And this is unlike any Hitman movie I've ever seen in my life. Which is funny because on the surface, it really seems like a setup we've seen done before countless times, but this is way more a deep character study into the mind of this assassin that kind of walks us through his rules to live by while he's on this mission. Michael Fassbender kills it in this role. What the story has to say is interesting the whole way through, and the way the narrative is structured will keep you on your toes. It's definitely not the most exciting movie in Fincher's catalog, but the action that he does give us in this one is so masterfully done. Like, there's literally a scene where Fassbender has to go toe-to-toe with the guy that plays Sauron in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. If that doesn't have you pausing this video to go watch the movie, I don't know what will. Coming in at number 5 is Gone Girl, and for me, this is where we're really getting into the top-tier David Fincher movies. But at the end of the day, Gone Girl just gives you absolutely everything you could ask for within a psychological thriller. There's a ton of twists, deep character motivations, you don't know who to root for, the mystery doesn't end when the credits roll. And even though some messed up and twisted stuff happens along the way, when you get a story like this and pair it with the snappy direction of David Fincher behind the camera, what you get is an addicting mystery unraveling before us that you just cannot look away from. Rosamund Pike delivers the performance of her career in this movie, and I actually remember David Fincher talking about why he cast her. He needed a chameleon for this role, and she's able to look way younger than she is, she can look older than she is, she can blend in, she can stand out. And I'm a Boston guy, so you know I love any movie where Ben Affleck's forced to show more than 2 emotions for a role, and we get maybe 2.5 here. Coming in at number 4 is Seven, and this is an absolute buzzsaw of a psychological thriller, but what's really impressive here is that it's all in the execution. Like, when you lay it all out on the table, this movie doesn't do anything differently than every other detective story within the genre. There's a race against time to find a serial killer, and the 2 cops tracking him down. One's an old guy that's seen it all and is about to retire. The other's a new transfer that's trying to prove he has what it takes to be the best. Nothing there is new. But where this movie sets itself apart is Fincher's willingness to tiptoe over the line when it comes to the subject matter, to the point where it feels like we're watching something we should not be watching. Even down to the opening credits of this film, which have become iconic at this point, and I'll never be able to listen to Closer by Nine Inch Nails the same way ever again, but it's filmed in a way to make it seem like you're watching a snuff film, and it's from the perspective of a guy that's totally sick in the head. And I'm honestly still shocked that the mainstream audience celebrates and embraces this movie as much as it does, because when it comes to cop films, this ain't Turner and Hooch. This is some dark shit. I do think this movie has one of the easiest plots ever to make someone buy into it, though. Like, come on, a movie where two guys are tracking down a serial killer, stopping him before he completes 7 murders in the style of the 7 Deadly Sins? I'd be turning that on right away after hearing that. Just don't lose your head at that ending. Coming in at number 3 is Fight Club, and for a long time now, I've said that back in the day, this was really the movie that got me into film in the first place. My 14-year-old self is probably shocked and disgusted that it's not taking the number 1 spot on my list today. And I remember after 7th grade taking a trip to New York City with my mom, begging her to let me get this Tyler Durden red leather jacket. She said no and that I could never pull it off. Who knows the man I'd be if I had that in my wardrobe today? She made the right call. But even though this isn't at the top spot of my rankings, it very well could be David Fincher at his most iconic. The visuals are loud, the pacing is fantastic, and the editing is world class. Not to mention the sheer amount of subject matter and themes it covers without missing a beat or feeling bloated, especially when you consider that the setup is about a bunch of guys beating the shit out of each other to let off some steam. It dives into capitalism, toxic masculinity, rebellion, IKEA, and everything else in between. Brad Pitt and Edward Norton play off of each other so well and are honestly one of the most entertaining duos of any film in the last 50 years. And this is another one of those movies that definitely relies heavily off the twist within its story, and you'll never be able to replicate that first-time watching experience. But I actually think there are a couple aspects of this movie that become more interesting on the second viewing. For example, we all know that the first rule of Fight Club is... Coming in at number 2 is The Social Network. What a picture. And just to get this out of the way from the get-go, this movie has to have one of the greatest screenplays ever written, right? I mean, every line of dialogue is dripping with intelligence, wit, and beta male energy. It's like 12 Angry Men with college kids. I don't know if you can come up with a more entertaining tagline in less words than that. From a technical standpoint, Fincher really outdoes himself in this movie, and it might be his best performance behind the camera. Everything is so sleek, and there's not a single frame wasted in this thing. The way the story transforms from almost a biopic to a courtroom drama keeps you engaged from the beginning all the way to the end. Even though we have a pretty good idea of how this is all going to play out, you're still on the edge of your seat, soaking in all of the tension and hanging on every line of dialogue. To me, that's the sign of a fantastic drama. And obviously, there's no way that Fincher could have known this when making this movie back in 2010, but the staying power and the evolving relevancy of this film after seeing what Zuckerberg and his crew have been up to since its release is next to none. I'm honestly shocked he hasn't challenged Fincher to a cage match yet. That would do numbers. Coming in at number 1 is Zodiac. And I've said this for a while now that I think this is David Fincher's masterpiece. If you know me at all, I never use that term lightly. Might even be the first time I've ever said it on the channel. But this is an instance where every single aspect culminates and works off of each other to create an absolute powerhouse of a film. Fincher's direction is impeccable, the performances are fantastic, the story is engaging, and this is one of those movies where I look at it from front to back, and I've probably seen it like 10 times now, and I really don't think there's anything that can be improved upon in any way. This is the movie where Fincher showed us that he understands tension pretty much better than any other filmmaker on the planet. Like, I don't think we can talk about tension within modern cinema without bringing up the Arthur Lee Allen interrogation or the California basement sequence. Like, that basement scene with Jake Gyllenhaal still gives me the chills every time I see it, and I truly believe it's one of the scariest scenes ever put to film in a non-horror movie. And when it comes to thrillers, I'm one of those guys that has a hard time of letting just dialogue shake me to my core. Like, if there's no grisly visual component to it, it's just a guy saying, I'm going to chop your head off or something, doesn't really get under my skin. I'm a tough customer, what can I say? So it should mean something when I tell you that Zodiac is one hell of a twisted and unsettling movie, packed with the themes and the stories that Fincher always excels at communicating to the audience. I firmly believe there's not a director in the history of filmmaking that could tell this true crime story better than he did here. So there you have it, guys, my ranking of all 12 David Fincher movies. Now you know how my list shakes out, but I want to see what yours looks like. He has such a diverse filmography, so let me know in the comments below, in what order do you have these bad boys? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.